Hey guys, and welcome to the podcast from Austin, Texas. I have Brian Lang, and he's an entrepreneur, and he went from broke on paper to cash rich, and now he helps entrepreneurs fix their money machines. I'm really happy to have him on and talk about his journey and what he does for clients. Brian, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. And briefly introduce yourself and how you got started, and we'll dive into the questions.
Yeah, you bet. Brian Lang. I live in Austin, Texas, as was said earlier. Ultimately, I'm a CPA by trade, and then we have an outsourced CFO company as well. So what I do is I help high income entrepreneurs stop feeling broke, or those that are they feel like they should just be up here a little further ahead than they are. So typically that means strategic tax planning, helping with cash flows, business design that serves your life. So that's what we do now. Background, I was big corporate for about a decade. I was at the fifth largest CPA firm, and then worked out in Aspen for 2 years before I started the entrepreneurial journey. Super Aspen-y group of dudes, 300 million to 2 billion net worth, decade plus ago. So I learned a ton of stuff from those guys and brought a lot of what I learned from them into our current demographic, which I call the working wealthy. So.
Interesting. And what are the working wealthy doing that? Actually, what are the high net worth, the 300 million to 2 billion clientele doing that the working wealthy are not doing?
Well, they get the benefit. They actually got a hell of a lot of zeros behind them, right? The one thing they're doing is they are just 100% aligned. They have their dedicated family offices. So, they have their own dedicated Brian Lang on the tax side. They have their own personal CFO, personal attorney. So they do a really good job of making sure everything is cohesive and aligned. Everything dances to the same sheet of music. Now, rungs below them aren't quite as fortunate. And I personally think, I don't want to sidetrack too much, but there's a big gap in the space for what I call the working wealthy. Our clients usually make 750 to about 5 million a year of taxable income. So they aren't poor, but they're also not flying around on private jets. And they don't have that dedicated service level. We had a client who's worth, a high net worth family, they're worth about 40 million. And he was mentioning to me that they went family office shopping. And I was snickering at him. And he's the oldest son. He's like probably mid-30s. And I was like, how'd that go? And I already knew the answer. And that was interesting. And I was like, you got a little slap on the backside and said, come back when you're worth 100 million, huh? And he was like, yeah, that is pretty much exactly what happened. I've never felt so poor in my life. Ultimately, those guys in that upper echelon of society just have a level of service that most people don't have access to.
Interesting. So you help them with that. The other question I have for you is these working wealthy that come to you ready, what are they frustrated with? What are they trying to obviously overpaying on taxes, or they're just leaking cash? What are they coming to you for help with?
Yeah, I think when I initially started it, I was a little naive that just assumed when you were making larger dollars and larger paychecks, you were going to be a lot more organized on the back end. That typically isn't the case. Obviously, these people are smart individuals with the amount of take-home pay they're having, but a lot of them are suffering from the same issues that someone who may have a $2 million a year business and they make 200K. Leaking taxes is a huge one. We have yet to see, I was close the other day, but I'm still allowed to make this comment. Every person that's made 7 figures or more taxable income, so they're making at least $1 million. So far, we've been able to save them over 100K every time on our tax plans. And sometimes we'll have someone we're saving $500,000. So that's a huge one, leaking tax. And then the other one is, quite frankly, they just don't have their business stuff together. They may not have the financial acumen or the time to realize it. They're unclear on margins. They're not really looking at their business properly. They have it no different than lifestyle creep on the personal side. They have expense creep on the business side. Like we have someone we're working with right now where we haven't worked with them long enough to know this for sure, but I'm like 95% sure that they could probably cut 3 to 5 of their people. And basically what they did was they make a lot of money. And anytime someone started getting busy, they just reshifted some of that to someone else. So they're very inefficient on the labor standpoint, I can tell. So those are a couple of the examples I typically see.
Yeah. The audience here are doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants, and one of the common themes that the audience loves is real estate. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, real estate is overpriced. It's you gotta now. It's like you have to deal with hurricane, tornadoes, and insurance, and property tax, and squatters, etc. And it seems like all these groups, they go to real estate to save on taxes. Is there a better way, like real estate taxes or real estate businesses, other things? How do you help clients stop overpaying in taxes?
Yeah, so ultimately we own double-digit rental portfolio. My take on real estate is real estate. It has nothing to do with tax for the most part. If you want to grow your real estate portfolio, great, go for it. It does have some tax benefits, but a lot of people think, hey, I'm going to buy some real estate and it's magically going to solve my tax problems. Not the time or place to get into that nuance. It can help a little bit here and there, but also it creates headaches, distractions, and quite frankly, shit people aren't good at sometimes. We have another pretty high-end net worth client. They ran into some issues where it's interesting to watch, and they are good at real estate, I want to say, but it is their side stuff, no different than it's my side stuff. They have some very high cash producing businesses, and during COVID, everything was going gangbusters, so they did some stuff outside their wheelhouse. They started building some large scale multi-unit buildings and things like that. And they are in, I don't want to call them dire straits, but they've had a very rough 2 years. Unfortunately, they have a lot of net worth to help weather this storm and survive 25, and then they'll probably be good to go. But everyone makes real estate sound easy, and it's not, is the point I want to make there. So answering the actual question, sorry, I tangent sometimes. You might have to bring me back in. So actually answering the question on what do we do for taxes. So ultimately, I don't think there's a magic bullet on the tax side. What I have learned on the tax side of things on how we work is typically most CPAs don't have the time or the business model to go down deep with you. A lot of them are compliance based and a lot of them aren't good at selling services or highlighting what they can actually do. So you end up just doing tax returns, right? Hey, I want you to do my taxes. Okay, great. It's going to cost whatever, $3,000 for an S Corp and $1,000 for your personal. You owe us $4K. And that's the value exchange where the customer assumes you're a CPA and they want you to do your taxes, but they also want you to save money on taxes. And lots of CPAs aren't set up for that format. They may have the expertise, but they don't have the time to actually do that and implement it. So that's a major thing that can happen. So oftentimes there's low-hanging fruits. And then two other areas, just where I think we're probably a little different, is I learned from one of the better tax attorneys I've ever met. Like I said, I was at the 5th largest firm that does all this. So I had a personal mentor from him. And then I work with a very high-end group out of California on the West Coast, a family office. And I have probably learned 90% of my complex tax strategies from those two groups. And just what I think you're seeing in the space is I think you're seeing a wealth trickle down effect. So stuff that was available to the Aspen guys a decade ago are now starting to make its way lower and lower.
Yeah, interesting. How much we talked about the working wealthy and the like approaching the 1%, the 0.1%. What is the role of trusts to most, like in the hundreds of millions to billions? What percentage have trusts? Is it almost 90+%? Talk about the role of trust in saving on taxes.
Yeah, so not a trust expert. For my disclaimer here first, most of the groups we do have, obviously in those super high-end categories, everyone's going to have some sort of trust. Typically, if you're setting up stuff, trust a lot of time is for protection based. You're protecting your assets, right? Making sure they're dealt with in a certain manner. So frequently, you will see trust in our demographic as well. Sometimes, depending on the nature of stuff, you might have the primary residence in the trust, right? Things like that. So a lot of times you're doing it, and there are other situations, like we have a very complex trust we use when a lot of people may just say they sell a company, right? And they make 50 million bucks. We have some trust stuff we do for that is, yes, protection and tax plays. But typically most of the stuff we're doing at our level, it's not as tax relevant as it is asset protection relevant, or just making sure things will work easier when we have an end of life event.
Interesting. What are the 5 financial moves that keep the top 5% of business owners wealthy?
Yeah, so I think some of those moves are, you have to be tax efficient. We already said that one. I'm not going further there. We don't need to beat a dead horse, but like, you can't be tipping the IRS 100 or 200K a year, or 50 or whatever it is. That is a crazy amount of money over time. The second one is you have to know your numbers, and people talk on that a lot. But I think if you're really sitting back and being honest as a business owner, you obviously have to have a product or system that works. You have to know how to market and sell that product, and you have to know your numbers. In most business owners I see, they may lack financial literacy. Maybe they don't have the time to learn this stuff, but I would really question anyone listening that is a business owner. Like, what are you doing to improve your financial literacy? Is your internal team or outsourced team helping you? If not, what can you do to strengthen it? Because people just piss away money all the time by not having that knowledge. And I always say, we care about our clients, we care about their money. I can never care about your money as much as you can. It's impossible. So whatever you can do to steward that and have that awareness is extremely helpful, in my opinion. Another item in there that we see a lot, and I don't know if you want me to go through everything, but I think another gap is, I'm just going to mention 2 more. You frequently have the business owners, and most of our businesses, they're about 3 million to 30 million in revenue. Man, people really struggle letting go of control in those businesses, and they never elevate the number 2, or they never get a dedicated leadership team. And the business grows over time through like grit and determination, quite frankly. And there comes a point where you got to have other strategic players and thinkers and people helping you out. So that can be a game changer when someone can unleash that. And then another one I see is, like, we have something we call the working wealthy operating system. I don't think business owners really know what they should be like tracking and looking at or measuring. And a good example there is, I don't know how many small business owners you're typically talking to, but I'd say a large percentage of them, if I go in and I say, hey, what's your goal this year? Or what are you guys trying to do as a company? Pick whatever the revenue number it is, it doesn't matter. We're going to go from 5 million to 6 million. We're going to go from 10 million to 11 million. And that's the goal. It's almost always a top line revenue goal. And it's okay, how are you going to do that? Some know the answer, some don't, or some have a little fragment of the answer, but they're not really thinking through systematically to achieve that goal. You might have to do 37 things to hit that goal, 5 million to 6 million, ranging from marketing to tweaking your sales process. Maybe you have a gap where people fall off and you need to create like a VSL or something to point people to so they're warmed up before you talk to them, right? It could be a million things. And they aren't outlining the steps to accomplish that. And as a result, that top line goal just doesn't get hit very often. And there is no systematic approach. There is no quarterly planning to achieve it. And then further down more, there is no weekly scorecard or metrics to try to align to what we're trying to do each quarter.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I know we have around 5-10 minutes remaining. The other question, because some of the audience, they're just graduated. They're like they could be med students, they could be dental students, they could be residents. So how do you go? What numbers do they need to know to go from middle class mindset to actually like when they start making the big bucks?
Yeah, so I think just some like tips I would have for anyone in that demographic is, and are these typically business owners, or just they could be working at like a hospital as an example?
Yeah, like they're graduating from med school and they
Correct.
got a residency and they get training and they're making that type of clientele.
Yeah, so these are more of like your personal finance stuff, right? And my advice to everyone, I am 43 right now as we're talking. Some things I did very well. I'll share some things I didn't do as well. And I see a lot of our clients. One is if you're not paying attention to it, you're not going to know about it. So a lot of people just live life their whole life, right? They talk to their financial planner once a year and the financial planner gives up some number or whatever and shows you this dumb chart that's up and to the right and says, put this amount in a 401k, it's going to grow. They always exaggerate the percent. They always say 10. And I was like, it's like, I'd rather use a different number. And then they say you're going to be left with X amount of millions of dollars, right? That's like the drill for most Americans. You have to track what you spend. The one thing I was very diligent at in my 20s, I traveled all the time with work. So we got meals paid for us all the time. So I didn't have a lot of personal spend. And I was able to stash away a lot of cash in my 20s. And this was before like mint.com or any of those apps were out, right? I like manually tracked everything on a spreadsheet. And just did I save a lot of money this month or not? If not, why? And I feel like if you want a gender stereotype, women are usually a bunch of smaller purchases. Men are bigger one-time purchases like gadgets. Oh, I spent $1,000 on golf clubs, or I bought a kayak this month, whatever it is. So you got to have that stuff dialed in, understand how much money you are making after your taxes are taken out and what your spend is. So that's 101, right? Absolute key. And then I don't care if you make 50K a year, 500K a year, 5 million a year, you can spend it all very quickly. And most people, Pareto's law, right? The more you make, the more you're going to spend. It happens all the time. I see lots of high income earners, and you might be able to relate to this comment, but I remember back in the day sitting in an audit room when I was at BDO. I was like, man, whenever I make $100,000 a year, like I'm going to be set. Or whenever I make $200,000 a year, right? And if you notice, that number almost always keeps going up and the individual does not seem set. And that number can go to 3 million or 5 million or whatever it is. And so you have to have that tracking mechanism in there. And then what most people don't do, in my opinion, is you don't get rich from earning, you get rich from investing. Invest, period, end of story. Like one of the best things I did, I have made almost all of my net worth off investing in real estate. And I did it at a young age. Now, part of it was I was lucky. I was in Austin when we were booming, blah, blah, blah. But it's like I bought a lot of shit and I spent a lot of money at a young age and it has paid dividends. I used to have that tracking spreadsheet. Bought my first house when I think I was 27 and I was panicked because when I closed, I had $400 left. And I was like, I better not get like a car repair or anything or I'm screwed. And then I did the same thing again the next year. I was like, okay, I need 20K for a down payment. When I probably made like mid 50s to 60 at the time. And then how fast can I save this for a down payment? Like I said, I was fortunate. I traveled all the time, so I didn't have much expense. So I immediately bought another house the next year. I actually still own that house. In residential real estate, I call it get rich slow. I mean, that house cash flows like $1,200 a month now. I think I owe less than 50 on it. It's worth probably 400. I have lots of stories like that with real estate. So I think the main thing there is like invest, buy. The longer you wait, the more you're going to be stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our system is set up where if you own assets, you're going to do fine. But if you're working and scrounging and saving, but you're not investing, you're going to get screwed by inflation. The other question I have for you is what's the difference between you mentioned investing, but what's the difference between someone who gets rich from their business and someone who just stays busy?
Yeah. So I think the person that gets rich from their business, because I don't think of rich, for me at least, it's not economic only, right? I'm trying to think of an avatar to pick on easily. So like I would say, so we work with a couple high income earning real estate agents and they're creme de la creme. They're very high earners. They're best of their best in city. I think for them, most of them never figure out a way to step, like they're always the face, right? And with real estate agents, you always got good looking guys or pretty women. They're in their 40s, 50s. They got their nice car. They do their little reels where it's, damn, this person's put together. And I would say for them, when they're the face, they're never going to be rich on that time component, right? And then they're usually grinding during summer, spring and summer. So a lot of them, as example, I do a mini retirement every year. I'm pumped. I'm going to my place in Colorado on Thursday. I'm going to check out of life for about 40 days. So they don't have the ability to do that. So that's someone who doesn't have that richness in time. So I think the people that get rich from their business, they're physically printing out lots of cash. The ones who do the best have systems in place. They're tax efficient, all that, right? But ignore tax efficiency and cash. I feel like the better they get at processes and defining those, just the better run their company becomes and the better cadence they have. Like process is a very unsexy thing, but it's very important. And then ultimately the ones who elevate the number two, have the leadership team, they stay well-rounded and they're good learners. I feel like those are the ones who get from here to way up here. They achieve what they're looking for. While I know a lot of people who are just busy, and some of them make good money and some don't. One common theme, or I think I might have an article in my newsletter this Wednesday, but I can't remember. I know I just wrote this down somewhere, but I feel like a lot of our business owners, the ones who have peer groups, where they're in groups like EO or Vistage, I've done, like me personally, I've done business coaching for a long time. Those that have business coaches or formal mentors, it seems like they get there quicker and build that stuff out in a more efficient manner and become richer from their business as opposed to busy. Like we have some people, they have 15 million top line revenue. Maybe they're making $1.5 million, $2-3 million bucks a year. From the outside, you might be like, yeah, I want that life. I think a lot of people, if they peeled the onion back, they would not want that life because that person has so much chaos and stress they're chasing, even though they have the top line revenue and profit.
Yeah. Fascinating. Really interesting. If people wanted to connect with you and learn more from you, visit your website, how can they do that?
Yeah, so a couple places. We're very active on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter every Wednesday called the Working Wealthy Newsletter. Take a look at that. And then our website's upsidecfoservices.com. We have a cool little league magnet that just kind of sanity check for you. So if you go to upsidecfoservices.com and then you have your little / and hit 7 habits, that's a good piece of information as well. Talk specifically about working wealthy and how a lot of them get there. So those are 2 main spots for us.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love your candid and also coming from the best city in the US, Austin, Texas, and keep up the great work.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me as a guest.